Xbox did not want anyone to see this. This is quite possibly one of the most catastrophic leaks in video game history. Not quite as consumer facing as the Nvidia GeForce Now leak. We have learned so much about Xbox and not all of it is good. So for context, they're still trying to get their acquisition of Activision Blizzard past the FTC, obviously the US board. Documents are still being filed and they're being reviewed by both parties. And there's been a leak of extremely unredacted documents. And this isn't some like, they were sharpened over. No, this is just straight up. There's a lot of Xbox documents, emails, files, presentations, everything. And we have access to it all. This is literally their hardware plan for the next couple of years. This is their next generation plans even. This is leaked emails about acquisitions, including one that's absolutely bonkers. And of course, it's also all of ZeniMax's upcoming games. So Bethesda. So Oblivion Remaster, Fallout 3 Remaster, Indiana Jones, a potential return of Scalebound, theoretically, maybe, and even more. So the most important bits we're going to have to go through here is how they wanted to buy Nintendo. They even had a contact on the inside actually kind of working on making it happen for them. The future for Xbox is all digital and all cloud, although I think we all kind of expected that. There's new hardware that could change the future of gaming drastically, which is a quick way of saying they might move to ARM. I'll get into it, but that's a very big deal. So we've actually got a glimpse into what they think behind closed doors. And I remember the last time there's an Xbox leak, they did, haha, here's a funny meme, some social media stuff. They didn't do it this time because this one is very serious. So let's get into the hardware then. Here is the Xbox Series X refresh, which looks, I mean, people have pointed it out online, it looks like that basically trash can design that Apple had for the Mac that no one liked. But realistically here, it's just more internal storage, a lot of like small improvements. This isn't going to be a more powerful console. It's just something that it runs a little bit smoother, it runs a little bit cleaner. It's got additional technology, so you've got, you know, I/O updates, Wi-Fi updates, Bluetooth updates, efficiency on power, all that stuff. So this isn't really something you're going to go rush out to get unless you're an extreme Xbox fanboy. It's literally just, hey, it's time for a refresh because why not? Might as well. The other one then is the refresh of the Series S, which of course is basically the same deal here. It's up to a terabyte. Same price. You've got all those upgrades. You've got recyclable packaging. You've got low power standby mode, stuff like that, which actually, you know, there's a decent thing to be said for electricity prices recently, where I think actually having a lower power standby mode might almost pay a console back if you have it long enough. You also have a new controller, which is got Xbox Wireless 2 direct to cloud, which is an interesting thing to include in a controller. Bluetooth 5.2. They've got rechargeable, swappable batteries, stuff like that. New modular thumbsticks. Longevity, build improvements, precision haptic feedback, which is likely not to the same deal as the DualSense, but they're definitely kind of pushing towards the Switch-like HD rumble in a way, because, I mean, everyone has access to that technology, so why not? And quieter buttons and thumbsticks. So it's basically just, here's a new feature. Here's your launch timeline, where it's like, here you go, here's fiscal year 25, August, then late October in time for holiday. This isn't particularly exciting, but it is like, this is literally their plans, their timing's all been released, so Sony and Nintendo get to look at this and go, oh, is that when you're planning to release that? That's interesting. What if we release our PS5 Pro in whatever? Obviously, they have their own plans that are going to be kind of stuck in stone, but at the same time, they can literally just go, oh, that's your plan. We can market around defeating that. We can make some changes in our messaging ahead of time to preempt what you're going to do and destroy you. We can put heavy sales on stuff like that. The Switch 2, obviously Switch 2 rumored for next year. That's going to be a thing they can literally go, sorry, Xbox, get got. Now, the other important thing here is all digital future. None of these have disk drives, which is why they've patented this, which is basically if you get one of the new all digital things and you have a load of like backwards compatible Xbox games, you can, at some point, you'll be able to get an external disk drive, probably like something that they sell that will authenticate them for you. You just hook it up, which at that point you kind of go, what's the point? But then you realize they can sell that disk drive for something like $40, $50 and actually make a little bit extra profit off it. There's also a few other things here, a little like the mobile controller, which looks a little like a backbone. There's the one-hand controller for if you're playing, you know, a game and for accessibility reasons, of course. Now, the next generation of Xbox, this is something they do not want people to know about at all at this point in time. But here we are. Their vision is to develop a next-generation hybrid game platform capable of leveraging the combined power of the client and cloud to deliver deeper immersion. Remember how that went for Crackdown? I don't know if anyone's going to be excited by hearing this, to be completely honest. It's just the same stuff. But then we've got the actual very important stuff here where it's CPU, decisions, investments, ARM64 versus x64, Zen 6. Are they going to swap to ARM? Because you think about Apple's new stuff with the M1, the M2, and so forth, being actually extremely efficient and extremely good ARM devices, you kind of see a world where maybe x86 and x64 are a little bit on the downturn. And if they can literally go into this, then we could be in for a big shakeup of how consoles work, especially with how consoles work compared to PC, because obviously everyone has an x86 PC. If consoles suddenly end up being ARM and we move away from the consoles or small PCs, then we're going to have a very interesting time. And I'm a little bit concerned about this, I guess, in a way. We'll have to see where it goes, because obviously if we start getting more desktop PCs with ARM stuff, then we might actually be in for a slightly better future. It's just going to be a lot of teething problems to get there. Obviously, I know a lot of viewers are PC gamers, so I think that'll be something to very much look out for, especially when you see what Sony is going to do. Another thing interesting about this is the thin OS, a lacking thin OS for under $99 consumer handheld devices. That'll imply that you're able to get basically a small Xbox phone or a small Xbox dongle or something that'll run a version of the OS and stream your games from the cloud. So they're very much all in on this cloud feature. And here's a load of stuff. It's basically the next generation of what they're thinking of. You look at the green stuff, it's established projects, the yellow is research, proof of concept, and the gray is kind of stuff they're thinking about. So you look here, you see game performance, super resolution, deep neural network. That's DLSS 3, DLSS 2, FSR, stuff like that, where they're just doing neural nets to... I think people are largely happy with how DLSS has turned out, and if FSR had a better implementation, I think it would be happier. But that's all completely like fine and there. Frame rate interpolation. I don't know if I need to say what I feel about frame rate interpolation, or we'll be here for a little bit, because honestly, as soon as you get into, hey, we'll just invent frames in the middle, then you start to run into input issues theoretically. And that's one of the things people have been worried about with DLSS 3. I know the Digital Foundry guys, if I remember correctly, have been largely happy with that and how it's panned out, especially if you're interpolating frames to just, hey, you've got a nice solid 60 FPS. What if we make it look like 120? You're not going to get the input benefit, but at least it's going to look a little bit smoother. Especially if you can combine that with neural net stuff to not have weird smear frames and stuff. Because I remember looking into this, and I think it was Star Wars The Force Unleashed 1 or 2 had a version of this running many, many, many years ago, and it looked really bad at times. So we'll have to see how that kind of pans out, but hopefully it's not that bad. There's also xCloud latency compensation, which is, I guess at this point, it's in research. Latency is going to be one of the biggest problems for core gamers, for people who really care about how gameplay feels and stuff like that, getting into cloud gaming, because obviously, of course, you're got 50, 100 ping, and you're on a phone, and you've got this, because obviously you think about ping and you think of playing a multiplayer game, and most of the time you'll see, the shooter classic of, getting shot when you're around a wall, and that feels bad, but that's only on the, you see everything with, render latency. You don't see it with that added latency. Imagine you're seeing things with that extra latency and your controls are delayed by that much. Imagine playing on a TV that has game mode turned off, but that's every single time you play, and possibly even worse. So at least they're thinking about stuff like that. There's also stuff like AI agents. Yeah, the more we get literally better AI in video games, the better. It's hard to really say anything about that. Matchmaking, player ranking, obviously established projects. That's all fine. This is literally just, can we use machine learning to improve all these processes? And everything here just seems more or less sound. The only thing I'm really concerned about is that frame rate interpolation, because I don't want a world where our frames are fake half the time. Not because I don't believe in some possible good there. You know how the industry is, right? You know how we go, wouldn't we love 4K? And they go, here's checkerboarded 4K, and we're going to call it 4K because we don't care if we lie to you half the time. And that's a pretty small deal. But you look at ray tracing as well, and how we've had so many issues with games released in this generation with, hey, here's ray tracing that you can't turn off in some cases, or here's the default version is 30 FPS ray tracing, like the Spider-Man, right? Try to play Spider-Man, the Ultimate Spider-Man, the remaster version, plays like absolute dog if you're playing in quality mode at 30. It barely feels close to 20 at times. It was an awful experience, and they're like, that's fine, ship it. So I'm a little bit concerned on that front, just with how we might end up getting, our game renders at 15, it's fine, just frame interpolate the rest, whatever. Those gamers will buy it anyway. That's my fear there, but moving on. This is the stuff that really, when this stuff leaked, I swear I was... Leaks internally tell you an awful lot, because what people say publicly and what people say privately are often very different. I think everyone's that way, but as soon as you see the private stuff, you're a little bit concerned. Because Phil Spencer he's fairly well memed, and I think he's fairly well loved. He does a decent job of standing on stage, talking all gamery. He's got that little game he plays where he teases stuff on a shelf, and that's all fine, that's great. Everyone kind of thinks he's our guy in a way. But then he turns around in an email and says, it would be a career-defining moment for Microsoft to buy Nintendo, which is, obviously you can be concerned with your own career if you want, but it is very much a different face than the one he shows publicly. So he's concerned about his career and wants to get Microsoft to buy Nintendo because that will be a good move for both companies. He ends this really long email with, "It's just taking a long time for Nintendo to see that their future exists off their own hardware." A long time, 4 dots, and one of those smiley faces with the hyphen for a nose in the middle, which is the sign of a psychopath. And that kind of goes to show exactly what's going on here, right? It's literally just, oh, well, the Switch is hyper successful. Why is that? Don't care. Our hardware is better because it goes faster. You know, the whole emulation debate around Switch, people will be happier if it is literally, okay, you can play your games, your Switch games, your beautiful games that you've made, do incredible Nintendo games, but they run better? Sure, that's fine, that's great. But it seems a little bit ignorant of why the Switch works for so many people and how good it is as a product. It's very, very American cultural imperialism, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you. But there's other things in the email that I thought were interesting, because they obviously were talking about ZeniMax, which then that went through because this is pre-COVID time. This is a long time ago. They wanted to buy Warner Brothers Interactive, which they did not, mostly it seems, because Warner Brothers have a tight grip on their IP, and they would have to license it out instead of owning it, which is pretty much in an industry where you want to buy things for IP and for projects. Not getting IP is a deal breaker. And then TikTok, which obviously didn't go through. But they were talking about Nintendo because they're the prime asset for us in gaming, and everyone knows that. They also said they wanted to buy Valve so they get access to Steam. So you can kind of think of it tells a story of exactly what they're thinking. What if we just buy these people and all their stuff is ours? What if we just do that? That's like a thing we can do. What if we just walk up to Gabe and say, "Hello Gabe, how much for Valve?" And then we can have complete access to Steam and that'll be our platform and to hell with everyone else. What if we just consolidate? If we buy all of gaming will be all of us and people will have nowhere to go. You can see that that's very much how they feel about things. There was one last thing about Nintendo I wanted to say, because it showed me how they feel and think a lot. Because in the email, Phil was talking that he had I think it was an ex-Microsoft board of directors member who was buying up shares in Nintendo, and I think it was their company was doing it. And Phil said he was in touch with them and keep in contact because they wanted to see if maybe they could use that to gain leverage in Nintendo board of directors. Obviously, hey, if our friend buys shares in the company we want, then, of course, then we can get them to let us in. We can have a man on the inside in the board of directors who actually get to say, "Hey everyone, I think Microsoft buying Nintendo is a great idea," and kind of push that leverage. Now, there's basically no chance it would happen. And that was a conversation that happened. Was it 2001, I think? It was a very long time ago anyway, where Xbox, back in the original days, were also considering a purchase of Nintendo, and Nintendo laughed them out of the room. So I think Phil maybe needs to do a little bit of history lesson on that front. But it does show exactly how they're thinking about it. And now we get to talk about games and studios, because Phil said that Xbox doesn't close studios based on their profit and loss. Okay, sure. He went and said that it's when leadership leaves, when like Lionhead, for example, the Fable team, that fell apart because leadership left, and then Ensemble, who lost their passion, and that was gone. So that's the Age of Empires and Halo Wars team. So it's fascinating that he goes, it's not about profit and loss. And then you go, well, why did the leaders leave? Was it because you were pushing them for profit and loss? Interesting, maybe. Why did they lose their passion? Was it because you were creatively controlling them and throwing away their ideas and making them work with unrealistic expectations? Maybe. So there's a little bit of a think one step further Phil on this front, though it was interesting because he was talking to one of his co-workers, and they basically had like a good back and forth about it. So it's not all terrible, but it's a little bit weird. And now there's something that was really fascinating too, because Baldur's Gate 3, right? I think you may have heard of it. It's just a little niche RPG that a few people have played. They called it a second run Stadia PC RPG that they didn't need to care about bringing to Game Pass. Can you imagine that? You imagine looking at Baldur's Gate 3 and going, that's some second rate bullshit. We don't want that on our platform. That's not worth our effort whatsoever. And then it releases. It's funny because that's not the first time they've done that either, because it happened with Genshin Impact. I remember a story a decent while ago where it came out that obviously Genshin Impact, the Hoyoverse is incredible games. You think about gacha if you like, but lots of money, lots of players. People are very, very happy with that whole ecosystem of games. So that's on PlayStation exclusively. That's obviously as well as PC and mobile stuff. But the console exclusivity for that is PlayStation and Sony. Xbox actually turned them down or something similar. I believe it was MiHoYo showed up to Xbox and we're like talking to them about Genshin Impact, and Microsoft were like, nah, it's not really for us, thank you. And apparently internally they have been kicking themselves ever since, and that's why there's been a big push towards a lot of Game Pass going, get us everything you possibly can, because they're just so worried about missing out again. And they've literally done it again, exactly with Baldur's Gate 3, and that must be so fascinating. But for some good news on their games, we do have ZeniMax's management forecast. And keep in mind, these dates here are pre-COVID, and everything has been kicked down the road by about 2 years here. So you look at stuff here and you see, okay, well, there's Doom Eternal, right, okay, that's out. Fallout, Wastelanders, Elder Scrolls Online, Deathloop, etc, etc. Project Hibiki here, obviously that is Hi-Fi Rush. That released in 2023, so you can see the 2-year gap here between 21 Hibiki releasing then. We've got Indiana Jones game, which, if we add 2 years to everything, is due out next year. An Oblivion remaster, due out next year. Interesting that they haven't said anything about that whatsoever. Another, more Elder Scrolls Online. Starfield DLC, which is interesting to see that that's actually solidly planned. I think no one would have not expected it, but we're likely going to see that in a year or so. Then there's Doom Year Zero and DLC for it, which is an entirely new Doom project that we don't know anything about. That's just, here it is. That's good to know, actually. Frustrating for the team that it leaked. There's Project Kestrel, which is apparently a project that they're going to have a lot of engine development and future-facing stuff on. That might be a new IP, which is interesting. There's Project Platinum, which I think people will see. Project Platinum! Xbox! Scalebound! Let's go! This is ZeniMax. It's likely not scalebound. No one has any idea what Project Platinum could feasibly be. And then Elder Scrolls 6, which obviously fiscal year 24, 26. So we're still 3 years away at least from seeing Elder Scrolls 6, which isn't going to surprise anyone. There's the expansion for Project Kestrel, which goes, oh yeah, it's clearly going to be an MMO. There's a licensed IP game, which I'm not quite sure we know what that is. There's a Fallout 3 remaster. So over the next 3 years, we're going to see an Oblivion remaster and a Fallout 3 remaster, which is, I think, pretty much good news for anyone who likes Bethesda games. Interestingly enough, there's also a Ghostwire Tokyo sequel on the go, which is interesting because that game was received reasonably well, and I'll be happy to see if they can make something substantially better, but without the original creative director, it's going to be interesting. Then Dishonored 3. Thank God for that. Thank God. Obviously, the critical success of Deathloop clearly gave them enough room to continue working on that, even though it is a few years out. So there we have it. That is a substantial leak of basically everything that Xbox are planning. Obviously, we didn't get to see, unfortunately for, I think, us, fortunately for the teams at Xbox and stuff, we didn't get to see a list of what games they're releasing internally, which is honestly probably a net gain, because there's certain things will go so wrong if that whole list gets leaked, and things will go completely backwards. But generally, this is fascinating that we've got such a comprehensive plan leaked. Whoever was involved in this is going to get seriously in trouble. Like, this is, as far as punishment goes, there's going to be serious punishment for whoever ended up involved in this or whatever mistake was made. But it is just kind of nothing surprising, right? Outside of a couple of games and the potential of them swapping to ARM for the next console, there's nothing particularly surprising here, because it's just Xbox doing what Xbox does. They're going to, at all costs, push towards the cloud. They're going to push towards digital. They want you to be playing your Xbox games and your Halo Infinite 2 or whatever else. They want you to be doing that on your phone because they think that's the future, which is fascinating because that's what's happened recently with the iPhone 15 Pro being called the best games console ever by Apple, when they used the whole, like, the best, because I think the thing with the phone camera was the best camera you have is the camera that is on you, that's on your person now when you need to take a photo, as opposed to carrying a camera everywhere, etc. And they're kind of going for that angle with a game console, and that's depressing to, I think, a lot of us, because we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear, hey, sorry, you like that big sitting on the sofa or sitting at your PC, that big immersive experience. No, you're going to play video games on the bus, loser. You're going to play video games in the back of your Uber. You're going to be on the plane playing your games. You're going to be sitting on a park bench outside playing your massive immersive RPG, or your second-rate Stadia PC RPG, as it were. You're going to be playing that, and it's going to be on a phone that's like, 6-7 inches in diameter, and you're going to have this like really tiny little crunchy handheld. And I think there's definitely place for mobile games, for sure. And it just feels frustrating that that's the whole Xbox plan, is combined power of the client and cloud, deliver deeper immersion, entirely new class of game experiences, optimized for creators. I don't want a game console that doesn't run my game if it's not connected to the internet. No one wants that. Even you consider any of the latency stuff involved in that, even if they architect a good solution, I think a lot of us would rather them just focus on making good games. And that's why the purchase of Nintendo talk here really kind of tilted me, because they're saying it's taking a long time for Nintendo to see their future exists off their own hardware. Look at the Switch sales and tell me that's true. Look at how many people own a Switch, love it to pieces, play games that don't run that well, that don't even look that great, and have the time of their lives. You look at that and you say, well, that obviously there are downsides to that for like a lot of us who are, used to PC gaming and great experience. But at least they stop and remember that the games are supposed to be good. Whereas Xbox's entire approach is so platform based, so hardware based, so everything based. And platforms are important, hardware's important. It's just not as important as a gaming experience. And there's almost nothing in any of these leaks that imply that Xbox, obviously this isn't comprehensive, this isn't everything they're talking about and stuff, but everything we've seen and noticed so far is just they're not focused on building world-class quality and experiences based off what's good game design or what's fun for people. It's like them looking at Baldur's Gate 3 and not seeing the potential there. A second run Stadia PC RPG, they didn't need to care about it. It's not the future we want, right? This is the future of Xbox, and it's not one I think we're particularly excited by in any meaningful capacity. Even you look at the Oblivion remaster, you look at the Fallout 3 remaster, those are going to be great. Those are going to sell really well. I think people love them. But at the same time, man, make some new games. And maybe this will all go away once Xbox's first party actually get their games out the door. That seems to be the one thing they kind of are doing wrong. And it's funny then when you go and you see what Phil talks about when it's closing, studio closures and stuff like that. It's just, we've bought all these. Will it all go well? Because you look at what happened to Embracer, right? Embracer bought so many studios, and obviously they got one deal. It was a big deal, to be fair. One deal cut out from beneath them, and suddenly all those games had to go. All those studios are having to go. And it's this consolidation, this consistent idea of if we buy more and be bigger, then we're going to win. And it seems to miss the point. Compared to what we've been talking about recently, we've been talking about Unity in much the same breath, where they're just going, to hell with people, we'll just take money from them. Experience of customers? Nah, to hell. What's that? We're going to have to figure out a way to have all of our Unity installs phone home. Well, that sounds bad for the customer. Who gives a shit? Who cares about the end user? And there's a lot of it seems to be from that angle here. And maybe I'm reading a lot into a couple of leaks, but it is just, here's the ZeniMax games. That's a good bit. The rest is just the usual. The usual stuff that's not particularly great. Anyway, I think I've talked enough about Xbox today. What do you think about all of this? What do you like? Do you see this and think kind of what I was talking about, or is it just more business as usual? Are you happy enough for them to just release pretty decent games every now and again and continue moving on this way? Because I think all of this, you think about opportunity cost, you think about effort, you think about the profitability and stuff. If they are putting a lot of effort into the mobile controller and all of their mobile stuff, etc., if that pays well, that's fine. But it does need to go back into the games. That's the one thing that needs to happen, is this investment needs to turn around and go back into the actual experiences, the actual reasons that we literally play video games in the first place. If they can do that, all this stuff's important. You look at them going, here's the all digital Brooklyn. It's a big cylinder, and you'll give us extra money for an external disk drive to play your old games. That just doesn't quite seem right to me. And with that, on a surprisingly dour note for usual, I think I will see you tomorrow for more news where we'll be talking about, believe it or not, more developments with Unity, because that story is getting worse by the minute. Goodbye.